Order. Question number 3, Gareth Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Energy and Resources and asks, is solar energy part of his plan to reach the, quote, ambitious but achievable target of 90% of electricity generation from renewables by 2025?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Energy and Resources, of course there is a place for solar energy in New Zealand, but we have to remember that solar generation is at this stage anyway a lot more expensive than other forms of generation, about 3 times the cost of grid-scale geothermal or wind generation, which of course are also renewable.
Supplementary question, Gareth Hughes.
To the Minister, does he support decisions made in the last week by Contact and Meridian to cut buyback rates for new solar by between 50 and 72%?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, on behalf of the Minister of Energy and Resources, Mr. Speaker, of course that is something for the companies to determine, but I note that the Greens and others are on the one hand encouraging energy companies to lower their prices, and in fact at one stage were proposing regulation to lower their prices, and now they seem to be concerned that they're not paying enough for their prices of electricity coming into them. You can't have it both ways. My understanding is that Meridian, for example, are saying that their input prices that they're paying for solar is roughly equivalent to what they pay for other renewable resources.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Gareth Hughes.
Does the Minister think it is fair that families and small businesses who invested in solar to escape rising power bills are dependent on the power companies which can and do keep changing the rules on them?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, I do have some trouble with the member's logic because if he's concerned about rising power prices, then saying that power companies should pay more for the electricity that they buy to sell on to consumers is a little contradictory, to say the least, especially in the case of Meridian, which is 100% renewable electricity. So the member seems to be saying Meridian should go out and deliberately pay more for electricity, for more renewable electricity, and then go out and sell it somehow cheaper to consumers. I would argue that they should be doing their best to keep their costs down and keeping the costs down for consumers.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Gareth Hughes.
Well, does the Minister agree a reliable, non-subsidised buyback price between electricity companies and solar homes that doesn't keep changing at the whim of electricity companies would assist in providing greater certainty for all participants?
Honourable Stephen
Well, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, I would not agree necessarily that companies should be forced to pay more for one form of renewable generation than they would pay for another form of renewable generation. If we're excited about renewable generation, I think we should be, then saying to Meridian Energy that they should pay more for a particular type of renewable generation because Gareth Hughes says so, seems to me a slightly strange way of going about keeping the price of electricity down for New Zealand consumers.
Well, point of order.
Point of order, Gareth Hughes.
Mr. Speaker, under Speaker's ruling 153/6, the Minister has no responsibility for the opposition. He seems to be putting words into my mouth. And to clarify, I'm not arguing for subsidies or higher prices. I'm arguing for certainty and a fair go between the company and the participant.
Order. I invite the member, when he gets a chance, to reflect on the question that's been asked and then on the answer that's been given. On this occasion, the Minister has addressed that question. I accept it may not be the answer the member was expecting, but the question has certainly been addressed. Further supplementary? Supplementary question, Gareth.
So why is the Minister leaving it up to the market, which is so imbalanced and sees the big power companies exercise dominant power over Kiwis with solar panels on their roofs, to set the price, the terms, the length of contract, and why didn't the government apply the same principle to Rio Tinto and Meridian?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister again, let's just go through this for the member. It does not make any sense, except perhaps in the Greens' view, to say to electricity companies, you should pay more for some element of your electricity and try and consider that some way of keeping the price down for consumers. Now, Meridian, for example, is 100% renewable energy. And if you're suggesting that they should go out there and pay more for one type of renewable over another because of a policy whim, well, that's fine, but that can only lead to one thing, and that's higher prices for consumers.
That's right. Supplementary question, Gareth Hughes.
Will the Minister consider empowering an independent umpire, such as the Electricity Authority, to set a fair, reasonable and non-subsidised buyback rate which would increase certainty for solar homes and small businesses investing in clean energy like solar energy?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, no. I think we have an independent arbiter now which is called consumers who want to keep their energy prices down, Mr Speaker, and I'd note that the energy component of electricity decreased by 0.7% in the last quarter because of the competition that the member decries. Now, solar does have a place, but there's no doubt that currently it is more expensive than other forms of renewable energy. And I just can't see why the member wants to promote that at the expense of, say, geothermal or hydro. I mean, he may have his views on that, but actually, at this stage anyway, it's fine for some people to go out and do it if they want to, but actually it's more cost effective to do things like changing some incandescent light bulbs for some cheaper light bulbs that will reduce the cost of energy in your house.
Supplementary question, Marama Fox.
Is the Minister aware of the impact of the solar power installation at the Waikaraka Marae in Kaihu, which has had dual benefits of saving costs and being environmentally responsible? And what support is available for other marae to take up solar energy as part of the push for renewables?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, I'm not aware at this stage of any government involvement in the installation at Waikaraka Marae. But again, I think we've got to be careful in pushing consumers into solar energy at this stage because other forms of renewable energy are less expensive at this time. And so I'm not sure that it would be appropriate policy solution at this point to be further subsidising solar when actually we're seeing increased use of hydro and geothermal, which are considerably lower prices currently. Now, in the future that may change. The cost of photovoltaic cells is coming down, but right now it's not necessarily something that the government would want to encourage further.
Question number 4,